All right, it's working. Okay, so I did not, since Thursday, incorporate our learning outcomes comments into the document yet. If you look on the thing, it's just there as notes still. I think that for the sake of time, it's worthwhile, and just so you guys know, on Thursday, I'm not gonna be here, but you guys can still meet during e-block if you want. And we can sort of come up with a good agenda for that. I was thinking that for today, we've kind of been toggling back and forth between sort of the overall calendar and then the individual units and going back and forth a little bit. And I think last week we made some good progress around sort of more granularly what skills and literary terms and ideas we're thinking about going in each spot. So I thought today we could spend a little bit more time on that and laying that out, and then do a little bit of thinking about lit circles and start putting together a list of stories for us to start reading and thinking about for that December unit. Because truthfully we have so much material for Frankenstein that I'm a little bit less worried about collating that, and the December piece feels more. Does that sound okay to everybody, or do you guys want to spend a little bit more time thinking about Persepolis first?
No, what you laid out makes sense. I think the difference is that although we don't have the same volume of stuff for Persepolis, it's more recent and it's already more aligned with our goals than like what I feel like I've been like throwing at the wall for the last 5 years. So the piles of Frankenstein stuff, like within that, there's just a few things that are as good. And World Lit is just, yeah, exactly. I mean, Rachel and Tim did stuff that is so targeted that it's ready to go.
Okay.
I mean, I think we could, categorize the material into more finite, more,
so
discrete things, but I think it's fine for now.
Okay, great. So the way we had sort of, where we were kind of on Thursday, if you are on the calendar page, I just started to like try and pull out some of the like discipline specific stuff in that literary terms and ideas row. And I'm also curious and interested in thinking about grammar also, and maybe just like one or two little guys to be building in each of those units. I mean, Abby has in, and I can make it as another row also, Abby has in Macbeth, I think, apostrophes and what's this, right?
Yeah, I do.
So I feel like that's a gimme there.
And thanks to work Abby did a long time ago, we have really good stuff on introducing quotations for Macbeth. And that's both like the technical piece of citation, but then also the stylistic.
Okay, so let's call that grammar and mechanics there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if apostrophes seems like a great place to start. Apostrophes, what's this? And introduce. And so.
And I have then and thans. Then and than.
Okay, so that's like grammar usage and mechanics. Okay, great.
It's showing up for you.
Yeah. So,
Maybe I'm not looking in the right place.
are there other, I mean, we don't have to go linearly yet. Are there other sort of, well, let's do the literary terms and ideas piece, and then we can come back and do the grammar piece, because in some ways that feels less well established. Do you see what's there so far? So that in September, October, we have annotation, tragedy, hubris, ambition. So those are sort of the literary concepts. And then thesis and topic sentences, thesis, topic, sentence, evidence analysis. Just sort of like sort of basic argument organization or argumentative organization,
So those are under the literary terms and not the skills, and they're also under the skills?
Well, they're also under skills.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure what the difference is here. I'm just,
Yeah.
I think some of it
Yeah.
truthfully is about making explicit to the kids what language we're using in this. Like, I would say the skills is the bigger umbrella picture, and the literary terms and ideas and grammar usage and mechanics are just sort of within that umbrella. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, none of this is
Yeah.
like official. All of this
No.
is whatever we decide.
Yeah, and the
this is.
categories may end up being more arbitrary, it's fine. So what was your question then for the next?
So then for November there I have empathy, tone, voice, and close reading, which seems like the things that go with Persepolis.
Mhm.
What do you think is the next piece there?
For December, you mean?
While you think about that, I think, Naomi, really the idea here is that those things in that literary terms and ideas thing, like, it's about explicitly introducing that language to kids
Okay.
during those.
Yeah. Well, what we don't have here, and maybe it's because we're just assuming, and it's not a new introduction, but theme and motif, like, definitely re-emphasize those in probably September, October, with Macbeth. So that was what jumped out at me for December, but it's really not gonna be new in December. I can't imagine not talking about it before that.
But theme and motif are gonna come up in Macbeth also?
That's what I'm saying, is
Oh.
that's why I would
So I can go.
put
Okay,
it,
yeah.
put it under Macbeth, and then once we've talked about it, it becomes part of the conversation all the time.
One thing that I think we can crib from the science department, I just watched in Sarah's video, that as the science department is doing something similar to this, they're color coding theirs, like red is for introduced, blue is for with support, and purple is like expected to do independently kind of thing.
Cool.
So I don't know if we're up to that yet, but that might be useful for us to sort of keep track of these things.
Yeah, for sure.
So, December is short stories and stuff. Okay, so I would say that in many short stories there's irony.
Oh, I would also just, like, going back to November, I think we do need something about character there and character development.
I mean,
Not that they haven't talked about these things in ninth grade, but just,
and also,
Segment.
not that we're not gonna talk about irony with
Right.
Macbeth,
Right.
but
No, but
short
making a
stories
point.
often have a significant ironic thing that happens, so, okay.
I do tend to talk about like kind of like a story arc a bit more when I teach short stories. And like exposition and rising action, climax, like we talk about it. It's easier for them to spot it in a short story.
Do you wanna do, like, point of view or perspective?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, again, stuff that it might be easier to contrast when they're reading several stories that are like
Yeah.
close together.
Do you wanna be thinking about diction, like diction, syntax, words, choice stuff in December, or do you think that's a worthwhile thing to really hone in on with Frankenstein?
No, I think a lot of times we might say with a short story or a poem, you know, why is the first word of this story,
Mm-hmm.
you know, although, or, you know,
Yeah.
or something. I think, look, we can put diction here and it's gonna come up, it's just like,
I know.
all of this is gonna come up all the time, but it's almost like we
It's
wanna
like,
make
make
sure
sure,
that
yeah.
if we haven't touched on it, we do.
Exactly. I was gonna say that about maybe character foils. I generally talk about it in Macbeth, but
So should I put here?
yeah, I mean, we, like you said, we can go back and sort of color code or say like, you know, where we anticipate it popping up, but I think Abby's point is a well taken one, just like there's a list of what you make sure you cover with that book if it hasn't been covered yet. Like,
And so what about symbol, metaphor,
Yeah.
simile?
I feel like that's really good stuff to go in short stories and poems, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Archetypes sometimes. It's not one I always get to with 10th graders, depending on what short stories we choose.
I actually feel like archetype is something that would fit really nicely with the stuff across this line thing.
Yeah.
Because it operates in that sort
Yeah.
of symbolic.
Yeah, it depends on your understanding of. Like, there's so many illusions that.
Oh yeah, illusion.
Yeah. Depending, you could deal with round characters, but I usually don't get into it.
I mean, in some ways, these things that we've identified for September through December here are the like necessary precursors to really do a good job with Wittgenstein, right?
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Although, yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking about where I tend to fit in, like, for the first time, the discussion of kind of the terms related to time in stories. Like, we talk about foreshadowing in Macbeth generally. Although,
Foreshadowing. It's good.
yeah. Like flashback and media res, like I eventually get to those, I feel like, but I don't have like an activity I do or anything that like makes sure I get to it.
Those are great things for short stories.
Yeah.
I feel like they're riddled with why memory
So-
matters.
Yeah.
So flashback in media res and what was the other one? Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing
Put it
feels a
in
little
Macbeth.
different, but
Macbeth.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually this
These are
organizational
big.
argument stuff, is it not a literary term or idea, it's just a writing skill piece, so.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not just a writing.
Oh, paradox, you can make that. Definitely do that.
Okay. We can come back to adding to that.
I actually do not do archetype with my 10th graders because I find that they want to hang on to stuff like that and make it work, and they'll want there to be a symbol that they can write about, or they'll like I tend to want to
That's
just
exactly
let
why I've
them
always
experience
resisted.
the literature in the moment, kind of.
Yeah, like Rachel, I think does a great job with the hero's journey and like making it work. But I've resisted it for that reason, that I don't know once you offer them that how to like tell like
Like it doesn't apply to
the
every single
yeah,
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's saying we have to do it, so.
Right.
Well, and I also think like if you introduce it with Step Across This Line in the last 2 weeks of the year, like it's then something that they've heard, but doesn't jam in their thinking the entire year, and then they're ready for it to come back up as 11th graders maybe.
Do you guys feel like Tragic Hero needs to be somewhere in here? Or
Oh,
should
yeah.
we?
But that's
Well, where? Because
Well, that's
if we're not
Macbeth and
teaching 19,
Frankenstein.
well,
Tragic Hero
Yeah,
is
yeah,
Macbeth and Frankenstein.
do you? Yeah,
So that goes with tragedy and
I
humor.
think under exactly. I was gonna say under rest.
Tragic Hero, Tragic Fall. You know, something that I start to deal with in 10th grade, I don't quite know where it goes here, is judging or dismissing characters because they're idiots or crazy. And I think it goes to sympathetic character. There's a piece that we have to teach, which is what do you mean by crazy? What do you mean Macbeth goes crazy? And that sounds like you're dismissing him or making his problem too simple.
Mhm.
So it's a kind of a it's not empathy exactly. It's a not judge. It's a what is it?
Resisting judgment of characters.
Yeah, resisting judgment of characters.
Or being really articulate about that judgment that you're making.
Yes.
Because if you're saying, okay,
Yes.
that they say crazy, but what does that really mean?
Right. So a lot of times, like if you say, well, hopefully, if you say, what do you mean he goes crazy? If they eventually come to, he becomes not only immoral, but amoral. And then there we are. Okay. Now we're cooking, you know? But it happens.
It's actually about grounding evaluation in the
nuance.
text.
It's about grounding evaluation in
Yeah.
the text.
Yeah, resisting the temptation to generalize or sort of overstate.
Uh-huh.
I think
So
that's a lot of the
I
work
don't
with
even-
10th graders for
That's
sure.
not even a literary term. It's
No,
just
it's a
life
like
skill.
stop
skill.
being
It's a
15
skill.
and get older.
What did you say, Kate? Resisting.
The
making
temptation
over-
to like overgeneralize or it's not even always generalizing, but oversimplify. Yes, exactly.
You know.
Okay. Are there other? We can come back to the
That's a
literary
skill.
terms and ideas.
Love it.
I think it's actually in our scope and sequence. For grammar usage and mechanics, are there other friends we'd like to revisit over the course of Loose and Lose? Can that go someplace?
Yeah, I do that with Macbeth too.
How
And
do
conscious conscience.
How do 10th graders do with like run-on sentences?
I was definitely gonna put that in. I've done it with 1904 as like a starting place, but it's interesting because I find with 10th graders, like the ones that need that work need lots of it still, but many of them don't need it at all. So it might be one where we decide to pair it with a couple of other skills and sort of teach them at the same time and differentiate that way.
I think that there needs to be. There are kids who do comma splices and run-ons. Very few sentence fragments it can, but it feels to me like commas. I have like the big 7 comma rules and big 7 do nots. I think a little bit of comma instruction is really good for them, and so comma splices, run-ons, and they have to be told to stop using semicolons.
See, I teach semicolons, like not use them more,
No,
but
No, I say, I teach semicolons.
Yeah, the ones who are using
but
them when
then
they come
I
into
say,
10th grade are using them wrong.
If you don't understand
Yeah.
this, then don't use a semicolon. I'd rather you didn't use them than use them incorrectly.
Same with colons, actually.
Yeah.
Right? The ones who come into 10th grade using either tend to be using them completely wrong.
Well, November. The truth is, there's like a nice trajectory there between sort of getting their first round of Macbeth papers in September and October, figuring out who needs what, and then doing some focused sentence structure for November.
I also do it as the year progresses from quote introduction and like the technical pieces of it to with Frankenstein I'm much more explicit with them about like the judgment calls of which quotation, but even once you've chosen which quotation, which parts of it do you really need, paring it down, being really precise about what you quote, and the technicalities of like how to use brackets and ellipses to adjust things.
So let's call it quoting 2.0.
Yeah.
And actually with that ends up being like block quote format, which again is one lots of them use
In a 3-page paper.
willy-nilly to increase
Stop.
their page limit,
Yeah.
their page count.
How do you spell ellipsis?
2 L's.
So I think that, maybe this is an 11th grade skill after that quoting 2.0 thing. I find that my 11th graders have a hard time knowing how much context to use in introducing quotes. Is that a 10th grade thing, or should we let that live in?
Context?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, now we're getting into it. Now that's, using plot summary only in the service of your thesis. So then what is context?
That may be an 11th grade thing.
Yeah, it's a little bit 10th grade, but mostly 10th grade is topic sentences. A topic sentence having a claim as opposed to being plot summary.
So maybe that's the December piece as
Yeah,
they're
it
laying
feels
it
like
out there.
it's,
Yeah.
you know, if we're trying, you know, like we've been talking about with sort of leveling our goals, I guess, our learning goals, if we're trying to aim at like not the top of the top, like then I think that's a junior thing.
Yeah.
Like my 11th graders at the beginning of this year, I finally got them to stop dropping quotes. And now, even at the end of the year with the non-AP 11th graders, it's like, okay, well, you have to tell me why Stella says this to Stanley from this
Right,
moment.
right. Yeah. A lot of times I'll have them, you know, like they'll say something like, Stella and Stanley, have a fight at the birthday dinner. And I'll say, okay, that's plot summary. What if you put a when in front of it? When Stella and Stanley have a fight at the birthday party, something happens, and then they go, oh, okay. So you still have the plot summary in there, but it's in the service of something. But we start to do that in 10th grade, don't we?
Yeah,
A
I
little
guess so.
bit.
I just find
I
that I
let
don't
a lot more
do that
go.
in front of the whole class. That's an as you're workshopping with
Yes.
a kid and you can feel that
Absolutely.
there's a very relevant example and they're ready to hear it. Like, but I
Yeah.
guess that I still would want to lose sight of that. I wouldn't want to stop doing it.
Well, yeah, it's there. Just as kids progress. Are there other, I mean, this one for December topic sentences, making a claim is not really a grammar or usage thing. That's okay if we don't want them, if really all we care about is them knocking out topic sentences that actually say something.
Yeah, no, that's not grammar, usage, and mechanics, but it's skills, really. But a grammar, usage, and mechanics thing is the use of transitions.
Great, that actually also lends itself really nicely into the quoting 2.0 piece of like, if you know how this idea is connected to your previous idea, it's much easier to be selective about what evidence you want to use.
By the way, I categorically have my 10th graders avoid block quote format and take what they need and incorporate it into their sentences, and I do that in 10th grade, but maybe if we have block quote, quote format and avoidance.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like they just never need to have that much text at once?
They don't.
Well, so maybe I mean, I think that is a fair and simple thing. I guess I just never got it together to be like, nope, stop, just not allowed.
No, it's allowed, because I don't want them to ever think, no, I can't do that if they need to do that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, what, you know, usually then they just comment on it. They just comment on it.
If they end up, if they're
close
doing
read
it kind of well, then they end up breaking it apart below that anyway, and you could be
Yes,
like, well,
they
then
may
you
as
just
well,
don't even.
yeah.
Okay, great, so use of transitions is great. Okay, this looks good. So if you just look up to skills in December, I feel like the collaboration piece is really good and interesting and like new for, not that they haven't been doing collaboration earlier in the year, but it's really like a focused piece. Like through this experience of like doing lit circles of short stories theoretically. Does that still sound like interesting and like what you guys want to do in that unit? And then with those deeper, sort of more discipline specific skills underneath it, practicing close reading, themes and motifs, narrative arc, topic sentences, making a claim, and then with all of these sort of story words underneath.
It is. I wonder if there's anything we want to add. Like I know something we had talked about was trying to have this story collection, whatever it is, be more diverse. I don't know if there are skills then that go along with reading that kind of work.
Sure.
And maybe it depends on once we choose what we choose. Or there may be sort of background or cultural knowledge or historical knowledge that we end up needing to insert, which isn't quite a skill but doesn't quite fit anywhere else either. Because currently the texts that we have been teaching in 10th grade don't require much historical or cultural background. In fact, we sort of work against that a lot of the time, saying like, stop trying to figure out what life was like in Scotland in that year, because it's not helpful.
Great. So reading stories, like, I think it is a skill of reading stories from a diverse historical and multicultural perspective.
And like knowing when you have knowledge gaps that need to be filled to understand.
I actually have from Gracie something for interviewing, but might be applicable here too, which is like a set of questions about cultural competency that like might be interesting for kids to reflect on as they're like reading an Edwidge Endicott story or something. Like, what do you know about Haiti? Like, what do you not know? What questions do you have? Like, what assumptions are you bringing into this? Whatever the case may be. I actually think that would be like awesome. We can look for some additional resources for that also.
Can I just, while I'm thinking of it, add something to Frankenstein?
Yeah.
Which is, weirdly enough, doesn't come up in Macbeth as much. Suspension of disbelief. It does come up in Macbeth, but much more in Frankenstein.
It's a lot more magical.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I was just realizing, I forgot to say that before. Okay.
Great. Okay, so what are you guys imagining the kids will be able to do if they do these short story lit circles really well?
Can I just ask what is exactly a lit circle?
This is how I've done it in my class. This fall, my class, like I told them a bunch of short stories, I made them a packet. They all had to read all of the stories, but each group had to create a lesson plan for their story, and then they ran the class on that particular day. That's one way to do it. So they spend a few days in their groups reading the story, talking about the story, thinking about what the most important pieces are, and then developing a lesson plan on it, which included like checks for understanding for the rest of their classmates, like what they have. That's one way. Now I'm doing lit circles with books in my class, and they're sort of each day they've decided how much they're going to read each day. They assign themselves like who's in charge of discussion on this day in their small groups, and then they're presenting out to their classmates at a few different moments. I haven't figured out yet a good final assessment for them with that beyond whatever they present to their class. I want them to also do some writing. And when I did it in the fall with short stories, the kids each had to write a reader response paper about a craft element of the story they read. So, like, point of view or motif or whatever. So those are the ways that I've used them so far. I think there's lots of models out there that so what were you guys imagining? Something similar to that or something different? Or?
Yeah.
You described that to me before, so that's all I was imagining.
So the whole class reads every story, and then each different groups have the story to really get into and teach it to the class.
Right.
So how much
And I have lots of
input do you have in terms of how that group is doing with its presentation?
I gave them a template for how to create a lesson plan, which was also fun for them to just kind of like demystify how I plan our day. So I told each of them they had to do, I mean, it was like a chart that they filled out, and I, conferenced with the different groups that they had to come up with a do now that was like a question that connected text to self, and then they had to have a few comprehension questions that kids would do in pairs or small groups or on their own to make sure that they understood the basic plot and structure, characters, and then some activity that asked students to do close reading. So either they could choose a passage and have kids write about it. They could do a gallery walk with a bunch of quotations that kids responded to. I made like a whole list, and then some kind of closing discussion where they asked one big question that they thought was important to the story. So I have all those materials on that page. And actually I did it last year with my Individual in the World class with dystopian short stories. And I did it again this year with 11th grade. And it was pretty effective.
Yeah.
Was there any part of it you felt like didn't go well, or that like even 11th graders struggled with, so maybe it would be too much for 10th graders?
There are some kids in my class who have a really hard time collaborating. What I didn't do in the fall, but what I'm doing right now, is I actually took one of the collaboration rubrics that I found online from BIE, and on one side it's how our group is collaborating, and on the other side it's how I'm collaborating individually, and had this it was an intervention, and how do you think you're doing? Spend 5 minutes with your group discussing how well you're achieving these. What do you think are the things for you to work on? So I think that's, for me, that's the growing edge, is actually teaching them collaboration skills in that way and really articulating what it looked like. And I didn't come up with it on my own. I just found something online that looked good. But
Wait, so you did that before you assigned it, or at
midway when
okay.
kids were having trouble.
Yeah.
I would say that was the biggest pieces for me, was that I pretty much assigned them in groups based on their interest and giving everybody their first or second choice text. But I think I could have done better with the social dynamics of the group. So some groups are just, and I think I also was trying to sort them by reading skill, and I didn't take into good account collaborative skills. So those are some things that I'm still sorting through.
Do you think that looking for, however many, 4 or 5 texts that are roughly equivalent in their level of challenge is a goal, or was?
Good question. When I did it in the fall, I was really, and last year also, with the 10th graders, I was just trying to find a diversity of voices, so that the kids weren't reading 5 of the same story.
Right.
I did differentiate a little bit by length, because some kids, they can't read a 20-page story in one night.
Because the ones that weren't their story, they just read the night before that group
Right.
taught. Okay.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And did you, okay, let's say we have 5 stories. So, the garden party, say, is a much more difficult story than maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a story that's not as difficult. The Intruder by Andre Dubus, or did you decide who was gonna have what story?
I made a survey and I had the kids choose rank.
Oh, okay.
And then based on their rankings, then I assigned.
Alright. Well, I think you just have to come up with some great stories. I think this sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
my question is, like, I'm thinking that I might then wanna have a story that they all read and that they write a paper about
That's what I was gonna
based
say.
on the skills that they've garnered.
Yeah, I did have them do one story all together before we started in the groups, just so we like had practice talking about a story all
Okay.
together.
Yeah, okay, great.
Huh.
I have
Do
to
you-
go proctor an AP exam,
okay.
pardon me.
Okay.
Do
Well,
you
you guys, like I said, I'm not gonna be here Thursday, so you
Yeah.
guys can and should continue this conversation.
Can I just ask you a question about
Yeah.
that before I lose it? Given that we will have already done a couple of units as a class, do you still think talking about a short story together is an important start? Or could we flip it, like I thought you were suggesting, Abby, to the end where it's more of like almost like an assessment?
Oh, that's cool.
piece?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
why
what I
not?
was thinking.
Yeah.
That's more how I did it last year,
But I'm
because we did it like before we read 1984.
I'm
Okay.
also thinking of doing maybe one short story at the beginning of the year
Mhm.
as a kind of a diagnostic and
Mhm.
having them answer plot, like seeing how much they understand and kind of where they are
Yeah.
with something other than meditation 17. Like I kind of want to do
Or maybe
before
we could
Macbeth.
find a pairing though, like maybe something that, like it could be part of meditation
Meditation
17 unit, kind of.
plus a story, yeah. Okay, guys, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Abby.
I will see you later.
See ya.
I like that idea. Like, I mean, there are 2-page short stories that
Yes,
could be very
exactly.
generative.
Just-
No,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And something not horrible at the end, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, like probably nothing Russian where someone puts their head on the train tracks or something.
Okay.
I just wanna look at that.
Are you adding those ideas somewhere, Lily?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So what did we just say? Small group discussions and lesson planning, classmates, collaboration, reflections, and then a full class reading assessment. And that would be, and all of those are really focusing on classroom, right?
Yeah.
So that when the kids show up for Frankenstein.
Right, I mean, we will
They're-
start off with Persepolis, where the images sort of start teaching that, so this will be the first time, I think the first really rigorous time with text.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Frankenstein, they'll be ready to hit the ground running, hopefully.
So the things that they would be graded on here would be their lesson plan for their classmates, their collaboration reflections, and then their full class reading and writing assessment.
Yeah, although, was it with you, or I was in a conversation recently about like how to hold sort of the audience, quote unquote, accountable for the work that happens.
Oh,
Were you
yeah.
there for that?
Yeah.
Who were we talking about? So was Sarah teaching us something about? I don't know, somebody had like,
Yes.
the group that's teaching or presenting had to come up with a few questions,
Right.
and then part of the rest of the class's grade was they have to answer these questions, and so like it holds everybody accountable. Did you
Yes.
actually teach the thing you were trying to? But also, you can't tune out, you are responsible for learning today.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Which is why I like so much, like I almost never wanna call anything a presentation ever again and just call it a lesson every time,
Yeah.
cause it's so different, it sounds so much more active and responsible to the group.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So we had started a little bit, I know Kate, you had started on a short story.
Yeah,
That's what it's
so
called.
maybe for Thursday I can do more of that, cause I don't, have any of it with me or in my noggin. But yes, I have a big list and I had started to narrow it down and like kind of spot read a couple sample possibilities. And really Lily and I just started doing that, we found like a giant index of like international
Old
short
stories.
stories or something like
Oh,
that.
wow.
And sometimes we were able to be like, oh, short is 80 pages by your definition, that's not gonna work. But just trying to find like, I think Danticott is like a very good possibility, like, and just trying to find authors from places that we don't always read from and talk about. bring in female voices for sure, because it's a very male author heavy curriculum in this grade.
No, Persepolis.
Well, that's
Like
true,
this
we
much
did
love
make a big
that.
change to that, you're right. So yeah, I can
So-
like try to prep for Thursday some ideas, and maybe we can make some progress at
And
like,
Naomi, if you have any favorite short stories too that you
for
want to
sure.
bring in.
And
I would say
one question I had about that though is like, does that assume we're reading in translation, and what does that
I was
change
just
for
gonna
us?
ask that same question.
I mean, on one hand, I feel like it's, if we're trying to teach, like if this is specifically where we're trying to hone their close reading skills, it's like problematic in a way that it otherwise might not be.
Right.
At the same time, like, it's not a problem we dodge in later courses. Like, you just name it for what it is and acknowledge those shortcomings. And it does fit in with other conversations I'm always having with 10th graders about, like, we don't care about what the author wants you to think. Like, that's not your job to figure out.
I would also say that when Eugenovi was here, and whenever she was here in March,
Yeah.
one of the things she talked about is the art of translation, and that like it is also literary. Like they're choosing their words purposefully, also in terms of trying to like relay the not just the meaning but the beauty of the language in the original version.
Yeah.
So
We might want to think later down the road a little more specifically about when we have them talk and write about that, though. Does that mean we're always asking them to, like, should they be framing it as, like, the text suggests, this diction suggests, other than, like, as opposed to Shakespeare writes, blah, 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 you know? Like, because it's really the translator and the author, and it gets murky really quickly.
I do think there's probably enough. What are we looking for? Really, like 7 stories.
Yeah.
So there are probably enough world literature stories written in English that we can.
I think it's true too, but like, what is that choice really in keeping with our whole desire? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah. On Tim's shelf is a book of short stories by this guy, Daniel, something with an M, and he's Pakistani. And they're written in English, and they're beautiful and take place in Pakistan. I wish I remembered his last name. I think it's called In Other Rooms, Other Wonders.
Did you ever read, I'm sure you did, I think we've talked about it actually, Jhumpa Lahiri's essay about, like,
In translation.
yeah,
Yeah. Actually, I read the whole book.
yeah,
I think that's on Tim's shelf too.
like, there could be excerpts of that, like, it might be that, like, it could be really powerful. Like, when we do The Color Purple, we've inserted this, like, powerful conversation about what it means to read the work of an author and, you know, grapple with their points of view on other things. Like, this could be a moment where we make sure, like, it's not just kids who end up in a certain senior elective who get to think about what it means to translate. Maybe we just make sure, like...
Well, is that something we could do, like, at the end, like, after we read the story, asking, like, does it matter that it was written in a different language?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be a huge unit, but like in The Color Purple, that's like one seminar discussion that I think actually has changed that course and sticks with those kids. I would love to, you know, if it fits, seize that moment too.
Okay, this feels good. So for Thursday, you guys will talk about short stories and poems. Does that sound
Yeah.
good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I may even run out to the Waltham Library this afternoon. I found a couple like global anthologies of short stories that might be easier than me trying to like hunt down PDFs on every corner of the internet.
Okay, great. And I think, you know, we're getting pretty close on this calendar, and it's probably almost time also for us to start bringing Jamie and Susan in to help us think about the more ready to go our rosters are, the better they'll also be able to help us say, okay, for these students, this kind of graphic organizer or whatever, these kind of abridgments. Necessary. Thank you guys.
Thank
This morning I was meeting with Farrah and she was like, I think you're doing in 10th grade. Do that for 9th grade next year, since Naomi and the new person are going to both be coming into it fresh.
Yeah.
I said, yes, probably. I'm not sure when we'll do it. But, I mean, I don't know if you guys feel this way. I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, how does all of this big conceptual thinking toggle to like the day-to-day lesson planning?
Right.
But
Which, I don't know, when I've been in your shoes on courses, Naomi, I find that way, way harder. But like that the reality is a lot of it is tweaks to stuff we already have. Like it's not out of nowhere, which is comforting. Like it is taking what we've been doing and arranging it in a more intentional way or emphasizing different things, but it's different than having to figure out 47 different activities to achieve these sort of hard to grasp goals.
well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I hope the other department chairs find that.
Oh.